Thank you very much, Lauren. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Frida Njogundongwe. I am Southern Africa Regional Director at IDinsight, the global firm, a global research, analytics, and policy advisory organization that looks to support leaders in the social sectors to maximize impact in their work. And we do this by supporting them with data and evidence to inform their decisions. I am quite, privileged to be moderating today's webinar. The title is Women Leading: What will it take to bridge the gender gap in leadership? And I think this comes with the lessons that have been learned and future opportunities that exist to expand this. And maybe before I proceed, just a few housekeeping issues. As you've heard, the meeting is being recorded, and the recording afterwards. We will have, a Q&A session after the panel discussion where audience members can, ask their questions, as well as, feel free to type your questions throughout the session using the, just share your questions using the Q&A or chat features on Zoom. So again, welcome. I will go ahead and introduce our panel. We have a very experienced, very diverse, panel here that I'm really introducing. Our first panelist is Ms. Betty Sungura Nyabuto, who is the Commission Secretary and CEO of the National Gender and Equality Commission, or NGC, or NGEC, as many of us call it. Ms. Betty is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and an active member of the Law Society of Kenya. She holds a Bachelor of Law and Master of Laws degrees in International Trade and Investments Law. Previously, she served as the CEO of the Law Society of Kenya as well as a Deputy Commission Secretary at the IEBC and as an acting CEO there. Previously, Betty worked in FIDA, Kenya, where she defended women's rights and participated in high-level litigation, which has had an effect on women empowerment. So thank you, Betty, for your work getting us here where we are. I think many of us are beneficiaries of your work. Karibu. Our second panelist is Faith Gitonga, who's a country manager at Cellulant. Cellulant is a leading fintech and payments company in Africa. Previously, she worked at Oracle, where she led their digital transformation efforts in the sector. And she also worked at CDN Bank, where she was the director responsible for strategy, monitoring, and transformation, and where she provided really invaluable insights and oversight to the bank's marketing, customer experience, retail, and corporate banking operations. Karibu sana, Faith. Our third panelist is Dr. Catherine Chebutungi, who's the executive director at the African Population and Health Research Center. Catherine is a medical doctor, and she holds a PhD in epidemiology and a Master of Science in Community Health and Community Management from the University of Heidelberg. In 2018, she was elected as a fellow of the Africa Academy of Sciences, and she has served on numerous boards, panels, and including at the USIU Africa, the In-Depth Network Board of Directors, and at the Kenya Epidemiological Association. Karibu sana, Daktari. You can tell that we have really amazing panelists. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Fiona Wanjiku. Doc, maybe you can tell us how to pronounce your last name. I am sure I'll mispronounce it.
No worries, it's Muyes.
Muyes.
Like Muyes. Muyes, yeah.
Thanks. Dr. Fiona is the acting CEO and director of programs at the Mawazo Institute. The Mawazo Institute is a women-led organization supporting African women researchers and thought leaders as they work to find evidence-based solutions and to local and global development challenges. So Dr. Fiona has a background in developing and implementing multidisciplinary projects, focused on marine biotechnology, sustainable aquaculture, and community-led marine conservation. She has an industry-based PhD in microalgal biotechnology and is a member of the Executive International Society of Applied Phycology. Doc, a lot of the words here make me have to go back and check my pronunciation, but this is amazing. She was recently selected as a 2022 women fellow. Karibu sana. And last but not least, our one man on the panel, Prof. Amos Njuguna. Prof. Njuguna is a chair of the Network of Impact Evaluation Researchers in Africa, NIERA, and the Dean at the School of Graduate Studies, Research and Extension at the United States International University, USIU Africa, inaugural Dean of that school. He's also a founding member of NIERA, and he has a background in financial economics over the last 15 years, with over 15 years of experience working on financial products, savings behavior, and financial systems in both the public and private sector. Prof is a passionate ambassador for institutionalization of impact evaluations and of transparency in the conduct of research. So karibu sana, Prof. You can tell this is a very diverse panel. And today we'll be having two brief presentations to set the stage for discussion. The first will be by Prof. Njuguna, where he shares some of the work that he's done in this. And then after that, I'll share a few minutes. I'll take a few minutes to share some of the work we've done. Karibu sana, Prof.
Thank you very much, Frida, and thank you everyone for joining us this wonderful seminar series. I feel privileged to sit in this panel because it's touching on issues that are paramount and very important locally, regionally, and even internationally. So to pick us off, I'll share with you findings of a paper that we've done for quite a number of years, and eventually we managed to have it published in the Frontiers of Psychology. Possibly I'll do two things. One, I'll make a very, very brief presentation. And two, I will also give you a link that has that paper, because of course the presentation will be quite short. The presentation will be quite short, so I could just share that to everyone so that you can see the paper is right there. But you'll allow me to just begin straight away. So our paper is titled Gender Bias and Sentiment Towards Political Leaders in Kenyan News. So what we did in this paper, we looked at how has the media been reporting political leaders, both men and women. But broadly, even before we get there, we ask ourselves, what's the issue? We know that gender biases have been traced to the agrarian revolution. And the trouble is that the agrarian revolution gendered the labor roles and said, okay, this is what men will do, and this is what women will do, and considered women to be inferior, so to speak, to men. And now the problem is that this culture has grown over the years and therefore caused negative social attitudes against women. And as a result, so many studies have linked this to violence against women. It has linked this to inadequate representation in societies. And you can see I'm saying democratic societies, meaning if we have still not been able to pass the 2/3 gender rule, and we are saying we are democratic, we are people who follow the Constitution, what does that mean? To us as researchers, the issue basically is that it puts women in a very tough position. You conform to social stereotyping, you are still not seen as a strong leader. You come out very strongly, then you are seen to be unfeminine. So where do our women go? So we decided to see what was the role, or what is the role of the media in all this. To put leadership and women into perspective in the Kenyan scenario, we appreciate that we had a Kenyan constitution that was passed in the year 2010 are aimed at ensuring gender representation. I'll be demonstrating that that has helped to narrow the gender gap, but however, it's not enough. Between 2013 and 2017, we know that there was no woman who contested for presidency or was nominated as deputy president by any party or coalition. And the National Democratic Institute, immediately after the 2017 elections, conducted a quick analysis to see what is the percentage of elected leaders. Remember that the Constitution 2010 had indicated that no single body, public body, should have more than 2/3 of either gender. So we had one basic research question: could bias in media reporting be a cause? Because this has been addressed in many situations. But then we decided, let us dig deep into the data and see what is coming out. And the National Democratic Institute had already stated that the way issues are reported in the media are important, because we know that the media sets the agenda. The media determines which issues are important. What is reported in the media is most likely what we will catch up amongst ourselves the following day. The National Democratic Institute had already shown that when you go to political platforms, women become overcautious. They, when they get to public disclosures, what will the discourses? What will people say? How will my statement be taken? And as a result of which, sometimes they don't effectively express themselves and so miss out on critical leadership opportunities. So how did we look at media? How did we measure the bias, if any? We did, this is on natural language processing, simply training, coming up with a code that is able to look at the nation. We specifically went for the Daily Nation because we could get a lot of data from 1998 to 2019. And also because it's the largest media house in East Africa, with a circulation of over 300,000 every single day. And so we felt we could use this as a beginning point. So we started by cleaning up, combined articles in years and sections, removed punctuations so that we are able to make use of Glove and WordVec, which I never worry about that. And also tokenize into sentences so that we are able to tell what we refer to as sentiment analysis, like to what extent is this aspect described and all that. So we did run the algorithms and then also did a sentiment analysis. I will demonstrate that in a moment, and then looked at the bias. For example, and it's easy to tell if you are talking of corruption, to what extent are the issues of corruption in the same setting directed towards women and also directed towards men. And we used the known segregators such as him, her, his, hers, those kind of discussions. If you go to the paper that I've shared, you will see all the words that we used. We also associated with men and women. So every time a name would pop up, we would be able to tell the computer this is a man or this is a woman, and then we would be able to analyze and see what exactly do we see. So what do we note? Quick results. The male names were mentioned 1.84 million more times than female nouns. And you and I know that in the media, any news is good news, especially when you are a leader. Being mentioned and being made more popular increases your chances and ability to be able to engage in public discourse. The numerical difference between the mentions has increased. and it peaked close to 110,000 more mentions of men than women in 2013, and that has stayed relatively constant. So even as we speak, that is what is happening. But please note, it is up to 2019. So we also looked at what has the 2010 Constitution done. And you see clearly, this is where the 2010 Constitution is. Sorry. You see that this is where the 2010 Constitution, the 2010 Constitution comes in. Immediately, we see a rise in the number of women who get into parliament. This is specifically on parliament, hitting to around 22% currently. Diagram A shows you how the gender gap is closing. And you can see the gender gap closing from 2010. You can see from 1998, it was much broad. Moving on, it's really closing down. You can see the gap is actually closing down. And my graph B here is actually showing the percentage difference if you get men versus women. So you can see initially it was close to -100 here, close to 1, in other words, but it has been increasing, and which is a good thing, but not still to the 65% that is expected. So what else do we see? That over time, the bias for gender words related to leader words became less negative or became more equal. So there was bias kind of reduced, and that correlated with the historical trend in parliamentary seats. So when you are describing a leader, be it a woman leader, and possibly because of the usage of common words, such as governor. So whether you are a woman or a man, if you use the word governor, then you are still referring to one. It's not affected by gender, as opposed to Mr., Mrs. When you do Mr., Mrs., it gives you completely different results. But here, I have a few important findings that I would want us to look at one after the other. And the first one is, in general, domestic terms. And when I say domestic terms, I mean women much more being associated with domestic cause and all that, as well as immorality, were associated more with women than men. That is 5H. H is this one here. So if you look at this, you see, so because we looked at terms that are that connote immorality, terms that connote domestic bias, and we see many of these terms being applied more on women compared to men. Immorality, the same. You can see, and remember, it is the way you report, the way you indicate, and I will give examples of those sentiments in a minute. So what are we saying? The second one, terms of influence continued to be associated more with men than women. That is 5E. That who is more competent, the terms that describe people who are competent, people who are strong, people who are good leaders, tended to be associated more with men compared to women. The next one, good leader adjectives, again, were associated more with men than women, but became less associated with men over time. That is 5F, the same thing. So we see that this bias is still dominating. And lastly, 5K, the terms for bad leaders, for example, this person is violent, tyranny, became more associated over time with male leaders, names that were continuously associated with male words. But this pattern was variable, and overall, there was no significant trend. So this indicated to us a bit of bias. And to give you examples of what we saw, Look at the first sentence that I just picked randomly. During the campaigns for the December presidential election, Mr. XX, I have removed the names, this is the political season, was reported to have said that the time for women to lead Kenya was not yet. Why is this important, ladies and gentlemen? If you read this in a mainstream...
Let me cut you short. I think we have about 2 or so more minutes.
Sure, I'm finishing actually. So when you have this kind of reporting from a mainstream media, it makes you get worried and start thinking around. There were, however, some positives, like the one I've indicated there, appointment of 3 more women to, and the negative, women who want to get to politics should be prepared to be dragged. Now this is reported, directly reported, and the consumer of the news, if you are a woman and attempting to do leadership, what would you do? So over time, we've seen that there was greater relative increase in negative sentiments surrounding females compared to males. That came out of our study. So what does this say? One, we've seen women receive less media coverage. We've seen 1.84 million mentions more. And when women are represented in the media, they are put in a more negative light than men because of those aspects that we saw. And in the 2017 election, in response to negative coverage, women tended to avoid media-based public discourse. This is stated in a paper by NDI, and instead turned to social media to reach voters because they would be much more afraid, what will I say? So what needs to be done? Remember, we started by saying that bias can be intentional or unintentional. So the first step is to identify, is it intentional bias, which can be addressed through ethical guidelines, incorporating in all this, journalists being made aware of their cognitive failures so that they can avoid them, amongst other aspects. And we are also saying it is not time to shun off the media. Is it time to shun off the media? We are saying, no, it's not really the time to shun off the media, but it is the time for the media to realize that people are cautious about these aspects of bias in reporting, and we need these reports to be made as accurately as possible so that people can make informed decisions and give women an equal platform as men in the mainstream media, which many people rely on for decision making. Thank you. Sorry, I've exceeded 1 minute.
Thank you very much. That was very eye-opening. I mean, it's amazing how, much as sometimes the media reports what happens in society, but also they shape, our opinions. So I think it's very interesting that this work is shared, and we'll be looking at, we'll be exploring how we can engage media to, help us in this fight for equality or more representation in leadership. I will just take a couple of minutes to share some work that my colleagues and I have been doing. We've been carrying out some foundational research, looking at, the representation of women in leadership, in economics and financial services. And this is, work funded by the Gates Foundation. And we're trying to see, what is the representation of women in these spaces, as well as what are the barriers that exist that keep them, underrepresented, where are the main leakage points, and what opportunities exist to advance women's leadership in these areas, with a focus on the 4 countries: Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and India. And this is aimed to inform the foundation's future investments moving forward. So I think we are all in agreement that women are underrepresented in leadership, in economics and financial services, as in many other areas. Yet, we have known for several years that, greater involvement of women in leadership in these roles, for instance, in private companies, leads to greater profitability. And we've had governments come up with policies to address some of these gaps, though many of these, policies tend to be poorly enforced, and so on. And so various challenges remain, and they are multifaceted. We have socioeconomic challenges, we've got political challenges, and cultural challenges at individual, organizational, and society levels, some of them, similar to what Prof has just shared, that continue to keep women in these positions. And so this study is ongoing and will go on through the end of the year, but we've identified some enablers, that have helped women to advance in these particular areas. Some of them being global and regional campaigns, the likes of Generation Equality and others that actually helped shape donor priorities that then, shape their grantees' priorities in terms of ensuring that women are represented, because the donor priorities affect, policies and practices of their grantees, as well as national, legislation and policies, things around, laws around discrimination, around sexual harassment, the workplaces, around maternity leave, leave, and so on. Internal organizational policies, very many organizations, some organizations have made significant, steps in this direction, enhance maternity benefits, menstrual health, support for lactation rooms that especially help target some of the main leakage points. Others are, networking and, fellowship programs as well that help funnel women into mid-level and hopefully eventually into senior level roles, as well as just seeing another woman in leadership, just that demonstrated effect. But despite this, barriers remain that need to be addressed. And barriers are, or the challenges around women's representation and the underlying causes of them are structural, and systemic. And so they require policy interventions. But a lot of the funding that has been available has been siloed, addressing very many small things, yet it requires macro level interventions. Again, lack of political goodwill. We've seen that, I think, also in our own political representation discussion. And then our sociocultural norms where women face an unequal burden of, unpaid care work, particularly after childbirth, another major leakage point, as well as just regular domestic chores. Often when women have lower income than their husbands and they have less decision making, as well biases of their male counterparts in the workplace. And those men live in the same society as us women. So we've also internalized many of these biases, So we find that many women have low self-confidence, many struggle with imposter syndrome. I have struggled with the imposter syndrome, for instance. And then women also turn down professional development opportunities, especially where they come into conflict with the needs of the family. So for instance, opportunities to go and study elsewhere or to move to, take a job placement elsewhere if it means disrupting the family. So these are just some of the initial discussions, initial findings, and we'll be looking to share more of this as we go. That was, I think, mine and Prof's presentations were just to set the stage. So for our discussion, so thank you for your time. I know we've been waiting for a while to hear the voices of the panelists. And my first question is to all the women panelists, the four of you. I don't know if Betty has managed to join us, but as female leaders in Africa, what are 3 things that have contributed the most to your success? What are the 3 main things that you'd say have contributed the most to your success? We could start with Dr. Catherine.
Thank you, Frida, and thanks everyone. Happy to be here and present on this panel with amazing women that I've never met in life, but I'm happy to meet on Zoom, and hopefully we can meet in other spheres. And so what are the 3 things? There are many things actually, but as I was reflecting, I thought about there may be more than 3, forgive me if I have to do that. But I thought about my early socialization. And I don't know when it occurred to me, but at some point, I distinctly remember my dad telling me that anything a boy can do, a girl can do. I remember that. I was about 4, 5, 6, but I remember. And that was in response to me coming back home every day crying how this boy took my pencil, how they broke this and how they did that. And him telling me that anything a boy can do, a girl can do. So I don't know how much of that I internalized, but I grew up knowing that anything a boy can do, a girl can do. And I actually did things in my teenage years that some of my siblings didn't do. I milked cows, I climbed trees, I did things that were like boy things, but maybe that's where that was coming from. But over time, I never really many times felt like, oh, this is girl, this is boy, because my dad had said that. And maybe that goes back to a lot of things, how we're socialized and expectations that are put on us from an early age. So that's one thing. Now, the second thing is like, how did I get here? So I went through life knowing that I can do anything, basically. But then now I'm here. So I'm a leader. Maybe the question is, do I see myself as a leader, and do I see myself as a successful leader? I think I see myself as a successful leader. Unfortunately, unfortunately. But then the things I see that have led to that, one is opportunities for coaching into leadership. And I've attended several leadership, coaching sessions where, as I was, climbing up the ladder of my current institution. And one thing that I remember was a coach saying that leadership is a mastery of self. And I went back home, I thought about it. And as the coaching went on, I kept on asking, oh my God, leadership is a mastery of self. So I was, it's about like asking yourself, who are you? And then taming your impulses and taming your, sometimes your emotions and taming things, but also trying to ask yourself, who am I? And then taming yourself and deciding that this is who I am, and being happy with the best version of you. And while that may seem, I don't know, frivolous for some, but I think for me it has been something like a guiding star. I need to master myself. I need to know who I am. I need to know what my values are. And I need to never to forget those values, even though it means losing my job, and never to compromise on those values. And so I think that's something which has been very useful. But then the last thing I'll mention is allies. And when I talk about allies in my personal life, my husband, I think, has been very, very, very accommodating. I cannot say how accommodating he has been. I'm like not standing in the way of my career aspirations. And then, of course, in my workplace, I think I had a boss that in whose footsteps I grew, that recognized my potential and nurtured it. And so there was a question about male allies, and I think we cannot overemphasize, what the role that male allies have to play in this. That you're able to see people for who they are and for their competence, and not to say woman, man, and forget everything that is behind, the gender that you see. Over.
Thank you very much, Doc. It's very interesting. Even in our study, we actually seen the role of supportive partners, as well as the role of supportive family, including very early in the formative stages. So that's very interesting. Thank you very much. I'll ask the same question of Dr. Fiona. What are the three main things that you'd attribute your success to?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Frida. And thank you, Dr. Catherine. I think you've touched on a lot of things that I can definitely resonate with. For me, I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think of your question is curiosity. It's just a sense of just wanting to know more and asking why, and asking why not as well. I think that was a big driver. And I was always, maybe it's a bit of stubbornness a little bit, when people say you can't, or, you can't do this, or you can't become a doctor, or you can't do this. It's kind of like, let me see if I can, because I'm interested and I want to try it. And then you kind of prove people wrong. And so it's a mixture of that and this kind of feeling of wanting to know more all the time and wanting to constantly learn and grow. I think that's what's been a really major driver along my career path. And allies. I think I just have to repeat what Dr. Catherine said there, because without them, I mean, it just wouldn't be possible. And it comes in many different forms. It comes in the form of other women who were, who came before you, who opened those doors for you and gave you those opportunities, and saw something in you, even when you weren't quite sure, and it's early in your career and you're a little bit unsure about what your potential really is, and they see it and they really open those doors for you and those opportunities for you. And then, of course, the family support. Same situation. My husband is extremely supportive. We have had times in our relationship where our the usual gender roles were completely reversed. He stayed at home with the children. I went to work, and he was completely confident and in that role. He completely felt safe in that role, knowing that this is what we wanted to do for our family. And having that support is invaluable to allow you to just explore your potential, explore all of these different opportunities that come your way. Another thing that I think is important that helped me along my way too is picking up all these skills that you don't necessarily think are skills. So it's like how to talk to people, how to interact with people, bringing that you know, your respect for other people to conversations. And that I think it ties to the values thing as well that Dr. Catherine said, having those values that I will treat people with respect no matter who they are. And you learn from every single person you engage with, and every single job, no matter what job it was, you learn something. It might not be, you know, something very technical or groundbreaking, but it's like all these little things that have helped me along the way that I've been able to transfer across the different roles that I've had. I think, yeah, just being open to learn and support all the time. I think those would be my points. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I think that's very, the thread is, you know, common, the allies, and especially the men in our lives, being curious to keep learning, you know, respect and so on. Thank you very much. Faith, again, the same question, you know, the three main things that have contributed to your success.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Dr. Taris. I think you've responded so well and just given a fantastic preamble. And it's funny, I was trying to figure out how to explain the allies point. So it's so fantastic that you guys went fast. And why I want to repeat it is because I think, Frida, we should have like a complete webinar just talking about just this support system that women have, and an ideal support system, not where we fully delegate what is our role, but where we have those ideal support systems. I keep saying if you're planning to get married, so to speak, you know, it really, really matters who you get married to. You know, it really matters who, you know, who is around you, whether it's your brothers, whether it's your father. Dr. Catherine talked about that. You know, it generally just really matters who's around you. And so I've seen what that has done for my career journey from the word go. I remember when I got done with high school, I wanted to be a doctor. Dr. Frida, sorry, I called you Judy. You know, I wanted to to be a doctor, and it was so funny. My dad was a doctor, and he's like, I see the kind of person you are. That's not the career to get into, you know, and so I threw myself into a totally different line, and just being able to see how that panned out, I'm totally grateful that, you know, you could see it. And right now, when I look back, for sure, that was not going to be my space, you know. And so through my journey, I think now for me, the first thing I'd probably say is the reason for my success, I'd have to say, is doing it afraid. That has been in my mind for years, and I keep saying everything I want is on the other side of fear. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was still in campus, I was super dead bored. You know, I went to University of Nairobi, and I have nothing against it. It's one of the best universities in my opinion, but I was in School of Business. We never had classes 8 to 5. You know, so you're in class, like you find in a day you have like an 8 o'clock that ends at 10, and that's it for the day. And I was like, I need to get something to do with my time. And I remember seeing an advert for, they were looking for radio and TV presenters. I'm like, how hard can this be, you know? And I remember going for the interviews, and at the gate, they're like, well, if you've not studied journalism or anything to do with media, please leave. And I didn't. I was like, you know what? I'll prove to them that I didn't study it, but I can do this. And I did the interviews, and long story short, through my campus was a radio and TV presenter. And what am I saying? I think as women, we need to smash this imposter syndrome, whether it's there or not. Because genuinely, honest truth, I've never had a man confess they have imposter syndrome. Maybe they have it and they don't say it, but I sit with my girlfriends, we talk about it all the time. So whether we are afraid or not, I can bet even the most amazing female leaders out there, you know, they get scared once a while. I think it's just human nature, you know, but I think we just need to learn to do it afraid. So for me, I tell myself I have to do one thing each day that scares me. I try to do that every day. It doesn't always work, but mostly does. And I think that has led to my success. I remember my first head of department role. I walked up to the CEO and told them, I want to give it a try. They'd had like 3 managers before who hadn't done it successfully. I was young, you know, I was like, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? You know, I'll get fired or find another job. You know, and I went in and I did it, and thank God I succeeded, you know. But yeah, so in essence, doing it afraid, I think that for me has been a big thing. I think the second one has been just the mentors I've had along the way. I've had mentors who've like, you know, questioned, you know, my intentions. I've had mentors who've pushed me, you know. I'm like, well, you know, the way you just go like, well, I think I'm okay here, and they're like, no, you could be here. Just mentors who push me. They're like, I know you're the only lady in that exco, but speak. I've had mentors who will even be like, Faith, in that boardroom, don't serve tea. Yeah, let me let that sink. That does not mean I don't serve tea at home. but in the workplace, why should I serve? Maybe they should serve me, right? So just mentors who've opened my eyes and who've gone before me. I met with one of my mentors the other day, and she's like 15 years older than I am. And she's like, let me be a bit vulnerable with you. And she told me some of the mistakes that she's made in life. And it's so funny. It was the exact same season that I was in. And thank God I had a sitting with her, because she literally stood between me and one of the biggest mistakes I was going to make in my life. Because, and hopefully it's something we'll talk about in this session, Dr. Frida, just the aspects of that, we end up as women in very senior roles, but we also have other balls to juggle, right? That's the honest truth. So if I have to be at work for X number of hours, do I have a partner who's with my kids? Or is my partner also caught up with work? And so, the next generation is left with no one to raise them. Those are important questions that we must ask, and are our roles different at home? Are we able to match them? What does that mean? And just being able to have those sort of honest discussions. So that way, even as we push for women leaders and things like that, that the women don't grow and we are blossoming in the workplace, but our families and our personal lives are just shriveling, because women are more empathetic, women are better caregivers, etc. But that's a story for another day. So coaches and mentors for me has been big. And I would even say sponsors, where you have people speaking in rooms when you're not there and they're like, yeah, Dr. Fiona is fantastic, give her this board position, etc, etc. And finally, I'll say purpose. Allow me to spiritualize this. I believe in God. I believe when he created me, he gave me purpose. And I think once you figure out your purpose, it's easier to win at life. Not it's easier, you're guaranteed to win at life. I would actually dare say that. So I think any of us, if you don't know your purpose, you should be working so hard, just trying to figure that out, because then when you do, you're fulfilled, you're excited, you wake up, looking forward to accomplishing this thing that, God has put you in this world to do. And I even dare say that perhaps it's only clear just for the next 6 months. And I think that's okay. Or it's clear for 2 years. I think that's okay, because maybe you don't know what you'll be doing till when you're 60. But if you at least have purpose for the next 3 months and you're mentoring 3 girls, just go for it and just be fully present for those 3 girls and then move on ahead like that. So I'd say those 3 things, Dr. Frida.
Thank you very much, Faith. I was called Judy. That's my big sister. I haven't been called that in a long time. It's good to really hear your perceptions as well, Faith. Mentors, purpose, and I especially like that everything I want is on the other side of fear. That we must surmount our fears. Somebody said the other day that be afraid and do it anyway. Just go ahead and do it. Thank you very much. I have the next question is for Fiona. What gender norms within our culture have held women back from attaining leadership positions? So in your mind, maybe you can share with us your thoughts around that, the gender norms that are holding us back.
Hey, Fiona, I'm in the room. Betty.
Yeah, Betty needs to go
great.
too.
Oh, great. Oh, sorry, it just says Bennett. Welcome, Betty. It's good to have you. I'll ask you to also
I've been in.
I kept asking when Betty is here, please let me know.
Welcome, let me just crack a joke. Thanks so much. Actually, I was in a meeting recently, and for some reason, the camera wasn't working for some reason or the other. And Janet Mboga was the host, and there was everybody celebrating the International Women's Day. And so I tried my camera on and on and on, and it wasn't. So Janet just said, no, Betty, we can hear you. Go ahead. I said, no, I must be seen. It's part of women empowerment. I must be seen, right? So anyway, that's my preamble. And thank you so much, Dr. Frida, for this very exciting show. Going straight into the question that I'm sure everybody else has asked that I need to answer, right? Well, I think for me, the one thing I would say is just getting out of the norm. Girls from the time we were young, we are taught to be nice, sweet and pretty, to be flawless, and not to take any risks. You actually feel you're not supposed to take any risks. right? So what I think I did myself was to step out and take that risk. And I associate very much with Faith's expose that she's just shared before. When I was in campus as well, there was this long holidays and you wouldn't really know what to do with them. You know, you're a first year, just getting into second year, and this is a low degree. You need to really get a hack of things, you know. So one day I just got a very smart suit. I told my dad I got to get this suit. And I walked into this very top-notch law firm. For those who know it, Dalian Figures. I walked in and I asked, could I see the managing partner? You know, a young girl who can hardly express so much in law. You know, you're not like this very big bourgeois lawyers we hear about today. And indeed, I was given access. And he said, have a seat. And he asked me, what would you like to do? I mean, like, what is it? So I put out my case. And I said, okay, fine, quick, start tomorrow. I couldn't just believe it. I said, you see, it works. So for me, that boldness has always worked and opened doors. So just getting out of the norm of this being nice, sweet and pretty, you know, is one. Then the other, of course, I would say is mentorship and also freely sharing ideas. That's really critical for us to mentor and to build onto one another as women in leadership. You know, I want to really associate in the interest of time with the examples that have been given by the previous speakers, just speaking to issues of mentorship and also freely sharing ideas, Frida. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Betty. And again, sorry, I kept thinking, Phil
Not to worry.
Yeah, but I like that. Let us be seen. I think we're always hiding behind. I'm constantly not wanting to be seen, you know. So that, I think that's very, very good. And you know, the issue of boldness, you know, confidence, just going for it. And I think this is what many men do. We need to learn to overcome how we've been socialized, you know, socialized about serving tea in the boardroom and so on. Thank you very much, Betty. So I'll go back to Fiona. You know, the gender norms that you're seeing in our culture that are holding us back, you know, from attaining our leadership positions, and maybe just one, probably, you know, thought around how you think we could address some of them, but especially focus on what they are. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure, thank you, Dr. Frida, and I'd love to hear also from the other panelists on this. But there's a couple of things. I think currently the way things are, there's a lot expected of us, right? We're expected to have, you know, good education. We're expected to have good jobs, but we're also expected to be really good wives and keepers of the home and good mothers and all of that. And it's a lot. We're being really stretched. We're being really, really stretched. And I think we're still at this stage where we're trying to figure out, okay, so how do we do it? Because we want to be able to do both, right? We want to be able to be good partners, good mothers, but also be leaders and really be impactful so that we can, you know, cause change and discourse and all of that. So I think, you know, society is asking a lot of us right now, and I think we're still trying to figure it out. I think it's this uncertainty about how can we balance it out a little bit for us so that we aren't completely stretched all the time. I think another thing that I wanted to touch on this was the issue of having to, well, no, actually, I'll take a step back. In my personal experience, you know, I came back with my PhD and I actually presented my thesis to my grandmother. And it took her all of 15 minutes to say, well done. Now, when are you getting married? You know, it was immediately. It was not even no time to, you know, celebrate or anything like that. It was immediately like, so, okay, what's the next step? And it's like, we didn't take a moment to celebrate that and then kind of think like, now what's next? You know, what else could you do? It was immediately, no, you have to be sure about, you know, you must settle down first. You cannot be too learned and too successful before getting married, you know, and all of this. So society has this kind of mixed perception of where we're at right now. I think it's a weird time in terms of what society is actually wanting from us. In terms of the workplace, there are certain things that are still there when it comes to how we're supposed to present ourselves, both how we act, but also how we look. And that is something I don't think men deal with just as much as we have to, you know. Questions around your hair, questions around, you know, I have piercings. There's constant questions about it, like, why do you have that? Like, does that make me less serious or less able? Like, there's so many questions, and I wonder whether men would be asked the same thing, you know? And there's also how we really, you know, act. So if we are too bossy, are we being, you know, forgive my French, but are we being bitchy? that's not the case. There's also misconceptions around this idea that women cannot get along and we hate each other for some reason, that we're fighting, or, I don't know where society got that idea from. We're here trying to help each other out, and society's telling us, actually, don't talk to other women. They're just there to tear you down, or it's a competition, or it's, this kind of negative connotation to it. And so there's different things that I feel like we still are having to question, like basically try and prove wrong. And it's like we're having to waste our energy to do that when we could just be doing amazing things and leading and creating, amazing things and change and all of that. So yeah, I think that those would be the things that kind of stick out for me. And I'd love to hear from the other panelists as well on this.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just thinking, really, I could be you. I mean, we face the same challenges, about hair, about everything. Sounds very interesting. I don't know that I'll allow them to do that. Maybe they can chat some of the challenges that they face, because I want to move on to the next question. I'm just seeing that we're not doing too well for time. And I'll ask the other panelists to stick to 2 minutes max for each of the responses to the following questions. So Prof, so we can, clearly, even based on what the other panelists have said, we can't discuss gender equality without touching on the role of men. So what actions do you think men can take, probably over and above what the other panelists have said? So at home, in the workplace, in other public spaces, to support women in a way that will result in more of them in leadership. So maybe if you can avoid what has already been mentioned, but maybe talk about others that, other ways they can support it.
I think for me, the key word is empowerment. The key word is mindset change, because it's indicated, and we know that this thing begins when we are young and then perpetuates to when we are adults. So the whole thing of looking at it and saying, can we give equal opportunities? We know the enablers: education, health, work opportunities, and economic opportunities, so to speak, and quickly picking from your presentation. Issues about meaningfully enforcing policies and laws when they are there, because we have them, but who is enforcing them? Meaningfully enforcing, and really avoiding small talk that has huge impact. Earlier in the month, you saw those of you who understand Swahili and follow on social media. Kwani mimi ni mwanamke, or if we were women, if you followed that conversation, and people would make fun out of it. But for those of us who research and do lots of these things and understand how mindsets work, some of these things really become entrenched, especially in the kids' minds. So avoiding those stuff will go a long way. Small things, but huge impact in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I like that. I mean, and really this leads us very well into the next question I'm going to ask, right? Prof has talked about the media. So this question is for Faith, and you've worked in the media space. So the media is a powerful influencer of behavior and attitude on global and regional issues, as was shown in the presentation. So what role do you feel that the media could play or should play in helping contribute towards bridging the gender gap in leadership? Again, I'll request 2 minutes. Thanks.
That's fine. Thank you. First, I love the presentation by Prof because it just totally set that pace on media. And I think more now than even before, the media is such a strong tool. So perhaps to even add on to the role of men, I think social media and media in general should use that to, and I know someone will throw a stone at this, but to empower men. But let me finish what I mean. You see, we are raising very strong women. In fact, I'm raising 3 boys, but I watch my friends who are raising girls and I get so scared. I'm like, I need to be so careful how I raise my boys so they can be able to handle this empowered woman in the future. And so I think social media should, and media in general should, and whether it's media policies, whether it's, sort of programs that are put up, networks that are set up, but we need to be able to also empower men to handle this sort of women that's coming up, because it's changing. We're getting more women in leadership. We're getting more women sitting at the table. But, you know, are these men able to handle that? I'll give a quick example. I was speaking in a circle the other day, and someone was like, you know, maybe the men of today need to marry, you know, women in the, you know, those like low-level careers. I was like, which ones? You know, whether you think about a teacher or a nanny or whatever it is, those teachers are growing, and tomorrow they're running organizations. In my banking space, one of the best branch managers I worked with started off as a teacher. The other day of International Women's Day, I met a lady who was a nanny and now runs one of the leading spas, you know, like, you know, the nail spas and whatever in this country, you know, so it doesn't matter. And men should, you know, shouldn't be saying, let me go find that lady in Shags. I think we should just make sure these men can be able to handle this sort of woman. And I believe media, our government, let me be a typical Kenyan and say our government, and us as individuals, you know, in the workplace, you know, I heard you, Frida, talk about, you know, like the crash and aspects like that, but I think we need to go a step further. You know, because how are we as women who've gone before, you know, it's sad because I go before you, then I'm like, it was so hard for me. I can't make it easy for Frida. Can she just struggle as well? You know, so instead of doing that, I make it easier for you to get to the top as well. And what does that mean? I hire you when you're pregnant. You know, very few people do that. You know, I let you go for your maternity leave and I leave you at peace to it. Set up policies to ensure that an exco cannot exist if it doesn't have a woman, you know, to make sure we write to, you know, like, let's say if I look at this panel and there are no women representing, I put it on social media and say, this organization is doing a webinar, but there are no women on the panel, you know, so it has to be those sort of activism, sort of, you know, actions that we do with every media platform that we have to be able to see change, and the right kind of change, again, I say, because if we just let the women be empowered, but we don't have the men to support and ensure that media is representing that, we will eventually lose, because then a society will break. So it has to be both ways, just different kinds of empowerment, and to just have the full support system of our media to just get that in the right place. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Faith. As you're talking, I was thinking about what quite a few people are calling panels. You know, you have panels talking about menstrual hygiene, and they're made up of men. I think we need to probably do media training as well to see how that can be addressed. Thank you so much. I think I'll you know, ask Betty to, you know, take the next question on, you know, the impact of having women represented in leadership, both in your organization and also in policy making circles in the country. So what impact do you see that's taking? Again, I'll request 2 minutes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, very well. Well, I think this can actually go as a PhD thesis, but let me try to summarize it into 2 minutes. When we have them in an organization, they'll definitely speak to gender balanced policies. They'll be able to look at right from the onset, right from recruitment, that indeed we have a fair play, we have affirmative action cutting across. At policy level, definitely. Issues like we've already discussed here, the crochet, just having that, having the flexi working hours for the nursing mothers. But again, even a program for events, actually having anecdotes of health breaks. Why? Because at times women also have to go and have they change their towels. You know, you also take into consideration such issues which are really, you know, men would sit on and on until lunch break, but a lady would have to go in an hour on and off. So she's a presenter like I am, give me a break, let me go and, you know, change, come back. So having sensitivity to such issues, they would also be able to inject a lot of ideas into gender mainstream policies. You know, for example, I talked about recruitment, but also even in budgeting. To what extent are we able to have gender responsive budgeting, even at national and also at private level, you know, because at times the budgets that we make are actually geared more towards patriarchy, and we do not know. But at times, once we have these indicators within the budget making process, then we are able to inject all this. So I think at decision making level, at board level, you'll be able to then have that uniformity, you know, in decision making, in injecting policies and programs that actually just are already gender balanced. And then also at national or also at maybe even county level or regional level, you know, you'll be able then to have the international instruments, you know, having to look at whether their domestication at that level is actually seeing light. You know, we've actually ratified so many instruments, but, you know, if you have the women in those decision-making levels in organizations, they can actually then look at the session papers, look at whether back on the ground, are we doing what this instrument actually speaks to? And finally, we'll have a lot of information sharing, benchmarking levels being also undertaken in order to see what is the best practice, what are other people doing. You know, we'll have a voice within those spaces as opposed to if there weren't women in leadership. And therefore we can speak to the issue that can protect the younger generation coming up. And, you know, it's not just women alone, but it's also looking at the youth issues, looking at persons with disability who are women, their representation in politics. You know, there's a lot that we can actually bite. So having us in leadership is actually critical, Frida. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I really like that. You know, some of the, in terms of gender responsive budgeting, in terms of ensuring that the treaties we're signatories to and the laws really that we've passed are actually being implemented. And I know that the NGEC does that, is really responsible for monitoring. Are we implementing these things? And I think that's excellent and great work being done through the organization. Yeah, and we want to see this, you know, really across the board. What role can we women, what role can our allies, you know, help with ensuring these things are being done? Thank you very much. I'll pose maybe my last question to Catherine, then we'll take the questions from the audience. So Dr. Catherine, what are the specific policies that governments in Africa should put in place that would result in empowerment of girls and subsequently a greater representation of women in leadership? So we are thinking about the future. So what can we do to empower the girls so that, you know, in the next generation, this will be less of a gap? Thank you.
I think governments have a lot to do because in almost every sector, really the pipeline for women leadership is weak. So you can start from way back, from childbirth, all these issues around socialization. It's hard to legislate socialization, but there could be specific initiatives that sort of bring this to the fore, whether it's in terms of communication, sensitization, or anything like that. So really the pipeline is weak because the attrition of girls in the education system is higher than boys. When it comes to transition, it's higher. In teenage years, it's higher. So the policies that ensure that girls stay in school, those are the beginning point. And then secondly, once they get to school, I come from Uganda, and when I was going to university, Uganda had a policy of adding 1.5 points to every girl, which would be added to their collective score. So they would qualify either to go to university, or they would qualify for a better course, or it was there. And that's good. But on the other hand, I think if you put like an intersectionality lens, there were girls who were like from socioeconomic strata, they went to the best schools in the country, but they all got 1.5. So perhaps if we're able to differentiate and say, if you're from this region of the country and you're a girl and you're from this thing, then maybe you need 3 points or 4, not just 1.5. And maybe the people who don't need 1.5 because perhaps they've had all the opportunities that would make them succeed. So affirmative action that is sort of customized and differentiated further than it is right now. Those are things that would perhaps get girls into certain courses, into university and all that. And then of course, lastly, I think people have alluded to some of these things. The employment law in this country can facilitate some of those workplace practices, how it is enforced, so that women don't have to make very hard sacrifices. They can take breaks, they can do things slower, but at least they are facilitated and supported. Those workplace policies around maternity leave, around flexi time, breastfeeding rooms and all that stuff. And then of course, something we've not talked about a lot, sexual harassment and harassment generally and discrimination. That those things need to be tightened up, because in academia, sexual harassment and other forms of harassment are the biggest factor that stand in the way of women pursuing research and academic careers. And so those are things which could be facilitated and through legislation, but also in institutions, like really tightening up those things, have the policies, but not just be happy with checking a box about policies, but making sure that there are mechanisms of ensuring that people don't get life-changing experiences really in the pursuit of a career through harassment of any form. Thank you.
Thank you Thank you very much, Doc. I like that, affirmative action, but targeted, and we can use data and evidence. Many of us are operating in that space to just help, governments and other organizations that are working in this space target that better. I remember, maybe I just mentioned some other work we did in India where we were helping using AI to actually help them target girls who are out of school, and a significant number were identified and brought back to school. So we can use, data and evidence to support this. Yeah, thank you very much. We move into the questions and answer section. I see one question, I think many have been answered, but there's one that I would like Faith to answer. How can women in leadership positions set themselves up deliberately to take on a board of director roles? You sit on an organization, I think board of women on boards or something. Maybe if you can let us know, and then happy to have a few other questions coming in. Maybe I'll allow one person after this to unmute themselves and talk, but for now, Faith, thank you.
That's okay. Thank you, Dr. Frida. So if you think about the history of boards, boards were, just mainly sat in by men, and older men, but that's of course changing. So there's the gender equality coming in, and then there's the aspect of not just gender, but even other aspects, so age is coming in where they're looking for younger people as well. And the other aspect that's coming in is now they're looking for other backgrounds and skills, so before it would be mainly guys in finance, then maybe someone as a company secretary, but now you're beginning to see they want people with IT skills, people with HR skills, people with marketing skills, etc. And of course, because of research, again, like Dr. Frida said, where they're saying, is it 80% of your target market is millennials? So they now want millennials to sit on boards because that's who's the focus out there for almost every sector. And so what has happened is that because of that, boards are beginning to open up to different type of people to sit on boards, which is fantastic. But the tricky thing is that boards is still a boys' club. Though that's changing. I remember sitting in a board training when I was trained to be a board member, and we were asked, and this was within Kenya, and we were asked to write on the board 10 men we know that we can put on a board today. And in like a second, we put up 10 names, and we were asked for women, top of mind women that we know who sit on boards. And I don't think we went past 3, but that is beginning to change. We're getting to see more women sit on boards. I saw the other day, ABSA advertised, not advertised, were announcing they had a lady on the board, EABL, I think BAT did the same. So that's beginning to change. So if you, I sit on 4 boards currently, but when I started off sitting on boards, take up even voluntary positions, that's A. So if, let's say, a relative has a business and they need to set up a board, sit on that board, because just like most jobs, they will ask for experience. So it helps, to learn even on that sort of space. So the first board I sat on was the Women on Boards Network. I'm part of the Women on Boards Network program, and this program trains women who sit on boards, and also trains people to be ready to sit on boards, and women. And a lot of organizations actually approach them looking for women to sit on their boards. So it's also fantastic because on a weekly basis, they'll have like 2 announcements. So you need to also join those sort of networks. But even though the board role is volunteer basis, like perhaps they don't pay, please take it up, because then you get the experience, you get to learn. Then the day you're sitting on a larger board, you're not learning and making mistakes on that board. Secondly, get training if you can find. There's so much on LinkedIn and aspects like that, so that, and such forums where board training happens, so you can be ready. Thirdly, get a resume for boards, profile yourself as a board member. So the resume you have to look for a job is not the resume you have for, for sitting on a board. I don't have time to go into detail, but you need a separate profiling for you to be able to sit on a board. And most times it's like a page and a half where you're putting out skills, because you see your skills as a board member is not what you need for an everyday task job. So ensure that you have that sort of CV or resume ready. Finally, I keep saying, and this is not just for boards, but it's for everything. I'll say it again. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. So if you know the chairman of ABSA board and you see them seated across some table in some networking event, just go say hi, firm handshake, look them directly in the eye and give them your elevator pitch. You know, like nothing stops you from there. Share around with people you know are networked in those sort of spaces and tell them, I'm looking to sit on a board. This is the sort of input I think I'd have. Just be intentional about it. Have your board resume ready, so if they ask for it, you can be able to give it. And of course, get what we call sponsors, the pure sponsors, I mean, you know, who are people who, you know, will speak about you when you're not in the room and go like, I've met this lady, her name is Agnes, I think you should have her sit on your board. So top of mind, those are the aspects that I think of quickly on just deliberate intention we can have as women to get and sit on boards. And the newspapers are always advertising for public sector boards. So get all that documentation ready, have your good conduct ready, so when that advert comes in, you can quickly apply as well. Dr. Frida, that's it on the board sitting as well.
Thank you very much. Maybe next year when we run this webinar, I'll ask how many people here have applied.
Yeah.
But that's very helpful. Thank you. Now our time is up. I don't know that there is any other question that has not been responded to. I'll ask that we each give a 1-minute parting shot. I'll start with you, Betty. Yeah, I'll start with you, Betty.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's good that we go the women empowerment way for leadership. And I just want to say that let's try and actually all work together. Let's not leave the boy child behind. I want to be an advocate of also the boy child. So we all work together. I want to just pick up on this illustration of a very empowered boys in a certain home set. And I have daughters, and if they're not as empowered as those ones, you know, or whichever the way, then we shall not be working in an equilibrium. So I think let's just work together. And there is no fear for the men in the room for you to empower a woman, empower your wife, empower your girlfriend, empower your daughter, empower your mother as well, right? So it's still Women's Month and we are enjoying the Women's Month. Thank you so much, Dr. Frida.
Thank you very much. There's many of us in this space who have sons. We will definitely ensure that all are empowered. Thank you. Yeah. Prof, you want to go next? Parting shot.
Yeah, sure. I'm a believer of action. Lots of action. And after all said and done, we've discussed in this webinar a number of things that we need to do. We've disclosed and shown that there are real gaps. And what next? For me, it's quite inspiring. And I would advise everyone on course here to take just that one point and take action. If you are in the context of policy, please see what are those barriers that are policy oriented that need to be acted upon. If it's implementation, we've talked and said that some of these issues relate to implementation. Just do the right thing, implement. If you are a woman seated out there and listening to us and saying, what do I need to do? Lots of tips have been given. Pick 1, 2, 3, implement. It is those small changes, those small changes that create the biggest effect. 80-20, we know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Fiona?
I think my parting shot would be a few things, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. The first thing is that you're not alone. Reach out to people, build your network so that you can move forward together. And don't be afraid. Go for it. Go for it. Just go for it. That's all I can say. Just go for it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Similar thread with Prof. Let's do it. Let's do what we can. Thank you very much. Faith, your parting shot.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me to start with. It was a great honor to be part of this amazing panel. I think my parting shot will be my learning lesson in this current role. I started this role like 1.5 years ago. Very tough for a woman. I'm being very, very vulnerable right now. Very tough for a woman who has 3 boys under the age of 6. So all these things I'm talking about, juggling all these balls was extremely difficult for me. But I've never learned the aspect of this work-life balance for real, like I've had to. And so my biggest lesson has been that I have to understand my season. And so my season right now, that yes, I'm in a senior role, but I have small babies who need me. So I've had to make some drastic changes, and I've been encouraging other young women to understand their seasons. So one of the drastic ones that I'll mention as my parting shot, is, the proverbial thing for Kenyans to do is to have enough nannies supporting you at home. So I decided not to have any live-in nannies and just keep one nanny. And it's worked amazingly because she comes and goes. I know it's hard to believe with this crazy job I have, but what that has meant is that I've been present. I've been a present mom at home, and been there to make breakfast. Like right now it's 5 o'clock. By 6:30, I have to be home, whether I have a meeting or not, because I have to be home for my family. But it's just this season. One day there'll be 15, 18, or leave my house. Then I can have a job that has 90% travel. I can work till midnight. So I think it's so important for us to understand our season. And at least I can say I've practiced it, so I can talk about it confidently. Understand your season, be present at work, be present at home, whatever home looks like for you. And finally, I said it earlier, purpose. Figure out what your purpose is. Have your halftime, like a soccer game, have your halftime and tell yourself, okay, let me usa, think about my life. What do I want my next half of life to look like? And then just live that without fear. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Juggling all the important things so we don't drop the most important ones. Thank you very much, Faith. And last but not least, Catherine, Dr. Catherine.
Yes, sometimes I despair, to be honest, about the world that we live in. And, the women leading really is a reflection of society. And there's a lot that is wrong in society. So the absence of women leadership is a reflection of women's place in society. And so I think we've touched on the themes of allies in this webinar. So for me, I'll end up by asking all of us, the women, but also our allies, to look around us and really whether this is the world that we want to live in. There's so much wrong in the world. Sometimes I fear for my 3-year-old son, by the time he's 20, maybe we'll have been nuked into oblivion by Russia. I don't know, maybe climate change. I don't know, we'll be living in freezers or something. I don't really know, because the world is going like in the opposite direction of where I personally want the world to be. And of course, if you look everywhere, this is a world that has been created by male leadership. And so thinking about gender equality is not just about your son and your daughter and what it means in their own, day-to-day life. These are things which affect the world. And so perhaps it's time for us to think about gender equality, not just for the lived experiences of women in our lives, but that this is actually something which could transform the world that we live in. And maybe we can look around, because if there was gender equality, of course, the women would be happy about that they are equal, that they are visible, that they're seen, that they're doing great things. But that equality could also lead to things that actually change. Maybe you could get it. We may have 0 wars for the next 50 years if we give gender equality a chance, not women leadership, gender equality. So let's look at the world we live in. I don't think it's not a nice place to be alive right now with everything that's going on. And perhaps what's missing is gender equality. And so we should look at it for the short term, but also the potential long-term benefits that it may have in transforming all our lives, not just women, but the lives of men and women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really like that, right? I mean, we don't know what the world could be if we had if we had equality, really. And I actually think the wars thing might be true. I like that very much. Thank you. And I think maybe for me, as I'm thinking about what we could do, the common thread about doing what we can do. And lately I was quite, privileged to participate in development of a women's economic empowerment national policy. So there's quite a lot that's going on. I know there'll be one on unpaid care work being developed by the Ministry of State for Gender, for the State Department of Gender and so on. So again, let's do our part, whether it's policy, whether it's practice, whether it's empowering the person we live with, whether it's raising our boys. I have 3 as well. So they are able to, support women such as ourselves. Again, affirmative action, there's a lot that has been said, and I don't want to go into everything. but I think really it's a call to action. Let's do this. So next year, and maybe in another 10 years, we're talking about something very different. So I want to really thank you all. I have really enjoyed moderating this panel, and also thank the audience for the various comments they've shared and the questions. I think this is really something we need to be talking about more and doing, and just tracking tracking progress on to see where we are at. Thank you. I'll hand over to Laureen to do some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frida, and thank you to all the panelists for honoring our invitation. For IDinsight and NIERA, this was also us reaching out into the other side of fear, as Faith has put it, reaching out to such busy and important people to get them to have this conversation today. So I'm so grateful that you've committed your time, but also your heart and your wisdom, and you've been so open and so specific in your advice and in what we can do as individuals, but also as institutions and as leaders wherever we are. And thank you to all the panelists for joining and asking great questions and engaging. The webinar itself will be available online. We're going to send you the link, and we'll send you the presentations as well. I think that's it from IDinsight and NIERA. Asante sana, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.